Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our listeners across the globe. This is in12d. We're in episode 19. Myself, Ramsey Chiri in Canada, and I have my co-host with me today, Susie Vaughan in Cork, Ireland. Susie, welcome.
Hi, everybody. So glad to be back. I've missed a couple of episodes due to my wonderful travels, but I'm excited to be back for this episode 19, which we've titled Full Circle, A Journey to Enlightenment and Beyond, with our special guest today, who is Joel Richards. And we are so delighted to have met Joel. I've been chatting to him over the last couple of weeks, getting to know more about his work and his incredible journey, which began back in the 70s, early 70s for that matter, as a TM meditator and a student, I guess, of Maharishi, and how his journey has progressed through meditation. As a long-term meditator, I was really excited to learn more about Joel's journey and how he went on to support other people on their journey. And, he offers meditations himself and attunements as well on his website, which is called Full Dawn Circle. So I'm so excited that we're going to go through some of your journey. I think what we'll have to do with Joel, because his journey is vast, is to possibly break it into two different segments. We will have two different episodes. So we'll try and get up to the 2000s with you this episode, Joel, and then we can always pick up where we leave off, because I just don't want to leave anything out. So a very, very warm welcome from both of us on 12D in 12D. And so we're always starting the show the same. We love to find out what was happening back in, I think it was 73, when something drew you to your first meditation, finding a teacher, seeking out your mantra, your personal mantra, and what it looked like before, maybe even before you started meditating, and then kind of what happened after that to lead you on this extraordinary journey.
Yeah, well, I think many people, especially in their teens, feel like there's something wrong with them, and I certainly did. And it continued into my 20s, thinking that there was something wrong with me. So I sought self-improvement practice. It didn't help. I then decided, well, I'm going to go to college and study psychology. And so I was in my second year of college, assuming I would become a psychotherapist so that I could figure out how to fix myself. And I was walking back home after classes, and there was a poster on a tree, and that poster was for Transcendental Meditation. I had no idea what it meant. I mean, I actually hadn't encountered meditation as a practice or even as an idea. So my first inclination was, what's that? And then the next thing is I was hit with, this is it. I have to do this. I have to do this. And I was in the next class that was arranged. And it was astonishing because I had a very deep experience in the first meditation of great peace and silence. And I thought, this never happens to me. I really didn't understand it, but I was highly motivated to dig deeper into it. So I signed up for the first retreat, which was 5 weeks later. And on that retreat, which was heaven, I decided I have to become a teacher of this. I want to focus on this. And so I continued to get my degree in psychology because I was kind of already had my credits in that area. But I knew well before I graduated that I wasn't going to pursue being a psychotherapist. But I also didn't know what else I was going to do to make money, because being a TM teacher isn't really very profitable. So, I did have to find a career. So that was how I got started. And it was one of those things that I was so sure about that I really did commit myself to the regular practice. And I still think regular practice is important in general, but this was a commitment twice a day for 20 minutes at that time. And to this day, I pretty much have stayed consistent in being regular in my practice, although some things have changed in my practice over the years. I'm not as limited just to transcendental meditation as a practice, but it is still the foundation of what I do today.
Wow, I can really relate to that that feeling that you had at that first meditation when you kind of realize this is it. This is the thing that I've been looking for, or this is sort of an answer to something that I've been asking about. So I can really relate to that, and just that desire to sign up for that first retreat, and how that journey it's like just free falling into something, and it keeps opening. Like for me, it's like doors just keep opening. You think, oh, okay, if you think you're getting it, you're probably ready for the next door to open, and it keeps unfolding in a way. Like, so take us to the next stage. So you became a TM teacher, and obviously that probably brings in lots of other experiences with it, does it? Is it a long process, or how does that work?
At that time, it was a 3-month in retreat program, and then going back out into the world and working in TM centers for a while, and helping out the teachers that were on staff there, and then going back for another 3 months. But when I went back for the second 3 months to complete the training, it was extended to 4 months. And then they were going to they did extend it for another month for people who could stay, but I had to come back. I had to come back to the job that I had found as a means of support. But because these teacher training courses were on retreat, there was a lot of time meditating. And so we were, meditating 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening. And so a lot of interesting experiences do arise when you're in those conditions. There were a number of things that happened. One of them is what Maharishi called witnessing, which may or may not be the same thing that other people mean when they use that term. But it is the sense of being above and apart from the world and kind of looking at it from a distance. You're just kind of observing it, you're seeing it, but you're not in it. So there were experiences like that, experiences of a kind of samadhi where there's just no content at all. There's not an awareness of the environment or the body, just kind of a completely empty state with no content, but profoundly peaceful, profoundly, well, I don't know. That's the best word I can come up with for right now.
Yeah.
And also, although Maharishi didn't talk about Kundalini as a part of his teaching, I did also have a Kundalini awakening, which in itself was pretty wild, but a lot of fun.
Like, you're definitely intriguing people now when you talk about that Kundalini experience. I suppose it's part of the course. When you meditate for long periods of time, you start to activate that energy. Do you want to expand so that for people who don't know what that is, maybe you can help them grasp it, and maybe the difference, what actually is? I think Ramsey put the question in our chat here. What is transcendental meditation? Like, in a nutshell, like how the practice is and how how that happens.
Sure. Transcendental meditation is an effortless practice of meditation. Unlike a concentration practice or a contemplation practice, it's a practice where a mantra is used for its sound or vibratory value. It's not used to have meaning. That's not to say that since it's a Sanskrit mantra that it doesn't actually have a meaning, but for the purposes of meditation, that meaning is not used, just the sound quality, the vibration quality of it. And it's used in such a way that one can do what's called transcending, which means going from the active surface of the mind and quieting down. And in that quieting down, the mind moves into quieter and quieter, more abstract, more subtle states. And then at some point during meditation, if just for an instant or for longer periods of time, there can be this moment where the thought process is entirely transcended, and then one is left sitting in silence.
Mhm.
Could be a samadhi that's free of content, or it might have some content, possibly physical sensations or emotions, or even thought, but it's a distinctive state that occurs during meditation. And the purpose of that is that's the glimpse into the underlying reality of who we are. That's the glimpse into what Maharishi called pure consciousness. I call it pure conscious being for a reason. We can come back to that in a moment. But that is what one, through practice of meditation over time, carries into waking state, not just sitting in meditative state with it, but it becomes part of daily life. And this is how, over time, the two merge. And that is living what Maharishi called 200% of life, 100% of the transcendental value of life, and 100% of the lived value of life.
So you're outside in the day-to-day after you've done your practice, but that awareness, that witnessing that you're talking about is there too, for want of...
It may not be witnessing in the earlier stages, because witnessing in the way Maharishi talked about it, and I think there are other subtleties of witnessing that he didn't really talk about specifically. But witnessing is really something that I put more in the category of an awakened state, because if one is truly witnessing, then one is resident in the underlying reality of who we are. So it's like a living continuum of pure consciousness, right? So prior to that, there can be glimpses of witnessing, the kind of sense of being pulled out of ordinary experience and seeing, getting some distance, almost like there's a perceptual distortion, like depth perception has changed. But the witnessing that Maharishi was referring to took it a step further, where there was an actual establishment in what I call pure conscious being, and he called pure consciousness. And so that's the foundation for self-realization.
So you were practicing like this for, I think we were talking, you were saying, for about 22 years before you really had the bigger awakening. I know you've had other experiences and retreats and that, but is this an appropriate time to jump into, that experience that you had, the awakening?
Did we need to come back to Kundalini,
Oh yeah, let's go back to Kundalini, yes, and
Okay.
come back. Good point. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I didn't know much about Kundalini. I think I found some kind of popular book at the time that talked about Kundalini, and it talked about this being the life force, this from a spiritual point of view, and that along the axis of the spine, there is a channel called the Sushumna, and the Sushumna, along its length, there are 7 chakras. And each of the chakras are associated with, you could say, different functions to some extent. And so the underlying concept behind it is that the Kundalini energy is not awakened until it gets awakened at the base of the spine, and then it moves its way up through each of the chakras and purifies them. And when it reaches the 7th chakra, which is actually the crown of the head, that's enlightenment. Well, it's much more complex than that. But what I can say is I didn't get enlightened from that. It was a lot of fun. I'll tell this story briefly. I was actually on a retreat when this happened. And people were meditating together, and it was really quiet in the room, as you can imagine. And someone at the other end of the room started making noises, kind of groaning and moaning noises. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm having such a nice meditation. Why did someone have to start making noise? And so I sat there for some time internally complaining about the noise that whoever that was making, until I realized it was me. And when I realized it was me, that was when the Kundalini just, and I was shocked. And I couldn't stop making noise for quite a while. It was just so intense. So it's a little embarrassing, but I find it very amusing that for quite some time I sat there complaining about who is that making noise. So that's Kundalini.
Were you doing some sort of self-inquiry practice prior to that? Like, who's that one making the noise? Who's the one having this experience? You know, who am I?
No.
Was there anything preceding that?
No, it was just that gradually, I was in such a deep state at the time I first heard it, that all of my faculties were not functioning yet. I didn't have the ability to quite, I hadn't come back online with my faculties, I should say. I was out, but not sleeping. So it was just this gradual process of, I kept hearing it, and then I kept feeling in my body, oh, I wish they would stop that. And I kept hearing it and feeling it. And eventually the feeling level in my body reached a point where I realized I was making those sounds because I could feel the making of them. And then once I realized it was me, then that was when, all hell broke loose in a really positive and fun way. So it was very memorable. Fondly memorable. So that's that. So where do we go here from now? I mean, where do we
Ramsey,
go
I have to let you have a word in edgeways. I'm sorry. Talking to yesterday. I just love hearing about his journey. Go ahead, Ramsey.
I'm good. I just have one question. So basically, this experience that you had, it's similar to an out of body whereby you were not fully within your body. You were outside. You could hear, you could see. Maybe you were in meditation, so you weren't seeing. You were only hearing. So it's only audio from the other side, and then you were transported back into your body, and that's when the realization came that the Kundalini. So how do you it? And I know it might be a bit difficult, but how would you describe this event that took place?
How would I describe it?
Yeah, like
You mean in terms of
go ahead. Coming from outside back into your body and getting all that surge of energy within you. Was it scary? Was it you understood what was happening, or something shifted within you while you were coming back?
Well, I'd like to say I was bathed in this. I was coming back through a tunnel of white light or something, but actually it was very simple. There was it didn't feel like there was any movement anywhere, but more of a sense of, almost like the mind couldn't grasp that the mind and the body were not in sync or something. So it took time for the mind to realize, oh, that's happening in this body, not in someone else's body. So it didn't feel like I came back from anywhere. It felt like I actually stayed where I was, which I think made it possible for the energy to move. But it couldn't move until I realized that it was happening to me, happening to this body. And so that was the moment where the energy just moved up.
Okay.
And what is the side effect of that then, Joel, outside of the practice? What you go back to, chopping the wood, carrying the water, and how does it feel to be in that body then that's had that Kundalini experience? Does it carry through in your day to day, or is it a one-off?
Yeah, so it opened up channels that made bliss more likely to be the case. For months after that, I was in a pretty much a state of bliss all the time. And then it quieted down. The energetic part of it, the movement that kept happening over and over again, that quieted down. And so I'd say it left the opening, the capacity to experience bliss more readily, but not necessarily have to go through that strong energetic flow for it to be experienced. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ramsey.
No. Okay, I'll go ahead. Well, we talked about how it changed you physically, and you are able to access that point of bliss faster. And you said you didn't get enlightened.
No.
But I'm sure something shifted in your perception. How would you describe that?
Well, it makes perception crisper, clearer. It's like changes the resolution. So if we're talking about, going from, I'm not sure I have the numbers right, like 720 pixels on a television screen to 2,700 pixels. That's a change in resolution. It makes the images crisper. So it affected my vision in that sense. It also increased the sensitivity to what was happening in my body. Now, I don't think I realized it at that time. It wasn't until much later, much later, and actually some stuff that we may not cover today, where I realized that it had opened up channels, for lack of a better word, that gave me the capacity to feel outside the narrow scope of my body in ways that could be useful. I don't want to go into great detail on that right now, though, if you don't mind.
Interesting. We'll keep it for our second
Okay.
episode with Joel. The opening of the channels. Yeah.
Yeah. Make a note, Ramsey. Make a note. Well, I know that when I was talking to Joel, I felt like I could listen to him for about 6 hours. It was just there's a lot of really interesting experiences that you've put down, and I suppose that have informed yours. And just letting everybody who's listening to the show today or to the recording, that we will, in about, towards the end of the show, have an experience with Joel where we're going to do a passive inquiry practice. So, do stay tuned for that. But just to move along from that Kundalini awakening, and do you find that when you have that taste of Ananda, that bliss, it's in your, for me, it's the drug of choice. It's like when it's a gateway drug. It's like, it's the drug that keeps bringing you back to your cushion. It keeps bringing you back to your practice. And sometimes it's like you're seeking something, or, and I know as a meditation teacher myself, I always try to follow the line that, you're not meditating to have a particular experience. That's not really the purpose of it. But what would you say, Joel, is the purpose of the daily practice in your personal experience or as a teacher?
Well, I would say the purpose of it is to engage in natural surrender. And by that I mean, it's not a practice of vigilance. It's not a practice of trying to change anything. It's not a practice of letting go. It's a practice which naturally allows the surrender to take place. And of course, in a meditation context like TM, the surrender is the natural surrender takes one into these subtler aspects of the mind and moves into transcendental consciousness. And so the purpose of that, of course, is to bring that back out into life so that it's lived. But natural surrender is perhaps another way of saying effortless. But I think that that many practices seem to focus on a kind of discipline and vigilance, a kind of constantly looking for results. I don't think that that's really productive for most people.
Yeah.
And the other thing about what I think that it does is, what natural surrender does, is it aligns us with the divine. It aligns us with the presence that's here. It aligns us with the energies that are here. It aligns us with the benevolence that's here. And it promotes peace and contentment in life.
Mm-hmm. So like your practice really is what's bringing you into an altered state in your waking, because you're able to surrender to what's going on. You're less reactive, I suppose. You're like, I can only speak from my own experience, but it does create that spaciousness between you and some of what's going on around you, because you become more conscious and aware of yourself and maybe how your mind is like. So I know a massive liberation for me when I was doing my teacher training and studying with Deepak was when I realized that I'm not my thoughts. I'm having maybe up to 70,000 thoughts a day, but I'm not kind of ruled by it. And that was a huge liberation for me personally. Like, so, from there comes the surrender. You can kind of ease up on yourself. Like you said, sometimes it can get a bit hard in there if your mind is hijacking your attention all of the time. Like, so, if we were to talk about how I know when I was talking to you, we talked about there's so many kind of misconceptions or, false ideas about what it is, what it isn't, why you do it, why you don't do it. Do you think we have time to just cover a few of those? I think that could be interesting, because getting more clarity out there, I think, is really important, especially in these times that we're in.
I just want to preface that what self-realization is.
Yeah, sure.
There are probably numerous ideas about what it is. It's when the sense of self, which is normally prior to self-realization, embedded in the head or maybe somewhere in the body. And like you're saying, there's perhaps an attachment to thought in a way where the thought seems to be the me rather than me being the one having the thoughts. Right?
Yeah.
So there's this release out of the body, mind, and ego matrix that takes place. And it's a very significant release. It's not a subtle thing you'd hardly notice. It's a very dramatic shift, so that the sense of I has, you could say, risen to another state. And it's risen to this state of infinite openness. And it is the conscious observer now of the body, mind, and the ego, and everything else in life. So the distinction between self and other, self and non-self, has the dividing line has changed, and it's moved between the sense of self and the body, mind. Mm-hmm. So now the body, mind is pushed out in experience, not pushed away and ignored, unless you think that's what you're supposed to do. But so I just wanted to clarify that. So that's kind of the basis of some of the misconceptions, because I think people, it's hard to conceive of something like that, really. So I understand how things can be misconstrued. So yes, so some of the misconceptions. Well, one of them that I think is really good here is the ego doesn't die. People will say the ego death, the ego died. It's just not true. The ego is personal preferences, things we understand about our environment, how to walk through a door, how to buy groceries.
Do I like blue or yellow? Yeah.
Right. So it's all
strawberry or chocolate ice cream. Yeah.
It's also beliefs about things. It's also our conditioning. So all of that stays intact and stays in place. The thing is that when self-realization happens, that it's such a dramatic shift that maybe for a while, we don't really notice the functioning of the body, mind, ego so much. We think it's maybe disappeared. What it does do is it becomes transparent. as though one can see through it, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So that maybe that transparency is what people might think is an ego death. So that's one of the misconceptions. The ego doesn't die, because without it, you wouldn't be able to function in this
True.
world.
True. And it's a fine line functioning in this world. It's,
You need all the help you can get.
Exactly. And I guess discernment comes into it as well, like, being able to, have your experience, but then you have to kind of discern, whether this is for me or if it's expanding me or contracting me, and to be able to, decide what your yum or your yuck is, or your yay or your nay kind of. And I think that the ego has to come into part of that, like as an informer to help us to make those choices.
Right. And also to make those choices in alignment with the culture we live in, because our cultural
True.
norms are part of the ego as well. We may not agree
Yeah.
with all of them, and we may be radicals, but that's okay. But nevertheless, there's something there that we're responding to, or that we're either aligning ourselves with, or we're rejecting. But nevertheless, that's also in the ego.
So back to the self-realization, because of the, clarifying that, I think is really important, because like you said, some of these terms and words are associated with different groups and organizations. And, if you're not affiliated with one of them, you might be kind of staying away from some of the terminology. But I know when we were talking, in your kind of terms of reference, you were saying that that's one of the first stages of waking up.
Right.
It's not an end point. It's almost like an initiation.
Right.
Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I agree. So there are things that can happen before self-realization, awakenings, realizations, and changes that can happen. But self-realization is the foundation of all the other stages that happen after that, because that's the stage where you come into being who you are. And
Yeah.
the thing about it that's interesting is that you always were. It's just there's this moment when the shift happens, you go, how did I not know that? That was always there. How did I miss it? How could I have been so blind? At least that was the way I experienced it. And so as the foundation of all the other stages, it's very important. It's pivotal.
Yeah.
And so the stages, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, finish your sentence.
So the stages that occur after that, depending on the model you're using and who your teacher is, would be unity consciousness in Maharishi's terminology. People are calling it oneness now in many different teachings, because that's when the duality of the sense of separation between self and other dissolves.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's more after that, but that gets even more abstract.
Well, yeah, we'll just take one little bite of the cookie at a time and try and chew it fully before we swallow it. Absolutely. I think though that's really, like, to simplify it down even more, like unity consciousness really is more like a shift in perception.
Yes.
Like how you see yourself and others in the world, like, and how you are,
Right.
interacting and how you relate outside of your practice. And I think that, people may be having different shifts in their perception through other practices too. It's not necessarily just solely through meditation. I think there are probably other ways for transcendence to take place in people's lives. But from your perspective, meditation has always been the constant in your life, you were saying. So as you progressed on your journey, and I know we talked about when, we got to the 90s, that you had another kind of awakening of such, like, was that like another stage of that?
Right. So shortly after I had that aha, like, how did I miss this? This is who I've always been. things started to shift. And what was shifting was moving toward unity consciousness. It didn't resolve until quite a bit later. But Maharishi used to talk about, he used to often hold a flower in his hand and he'd play with the petals and he would say, here's this flower, and, inside the petals is the sap, and inside the stem is the sap. And the sap is the foundation of this whole manifestation of a flower. So the petals are really the sap. The stem is really the sap. The leaves are really the sap. So that was a kind of a nice metaphor. So what I experienced, or began to experience after self-realization, shortly thereafter in 1995, was I began to see the sap. So it was usually in the context when it first started that I was sitting with a friend at a cafe and we were chatting, and I was looking out across the lawn and at the trees and the bushes. And something caught my attention, which was very abstract. I wasn't sure what it was. As I kept looking, I began to notice that the objects of perception, we'll just say a tree, keep it simple, that the tree became transparent. And I could feel that there was something behind it that was moving forward into my perception. And the more transparent the tree became, the more that moved forward into my perception. And that was the sap. And that was the process that began unity consciousness. I didn't establish it then, but that was the beginning of that, because it was that process of the increasing transparency of everything in my environment ultimately that made it possible to have the perception of what was underlying it, and to discover that that was none other than the self. I'm not making that a personalized sense of the self, but the universal principle of the self.
Okay. Do you think this would be a nice segue into our passive inquiry practice?
Sure.
Just looking at the time, but I really want to have enough space to do that. But I think that could be a lovely practice now.
Sure.
I'm going to spotlight you there.
All right. So basically, what we're calling this is a passive inquiry, and it's I'll explain its purpose after we just go through the experiment here. I'm going to ask you to open and close your eyes a number of times, and I'm going to ask you some questions, and then at the end we will summarize. So first, let's close our eyes. And now let's open our eyes. Let's close our eyes again. And let's open our eyes. When we close our eyes, it's not unusual to have thoughts. So I'll presume, since people can't respond directly, did you have any thoughts? So at least Susie did. I don't know about Ramsey. Okay, Susie and Ramsey had thoughts. So I'll presume some of the audience had thoughts too. Okay, let's close our eyes again. And now let's open them. So in the quiet of having the eyes closed, having the thoughts, did you notice where the thoughts were located? Did you get any sense that the thoughts were located in some place or another? And whatever that is, just sort of make a note. Yeah, the thoughts, I felt the thoughts were in my head or in my chest or, somewhere in the room, whatever it was. Those were your thoughts. Now let's close our eyes again. And let's open our eyes. Did you notice who had the thoughts? Where that observer or experiencer of the thoughts was located? Let's close our eyes again. And let's open our eyes. Did you notice the location of who had the thoughts? I'll presume yes or no, but so the question then is, are the thoughts and that which had the thoughts the same or different? So let's close our eyes. And let's open our eyes. So the purpose of this, and Susie actually kind of introduced it, perhaps unintentionally, is that for some of us, our sense of self is embedded in the thinking process. We only find ourselves by not acknowledging our thoughts. And the same could be said of we only find ourselves by acknowledging our feelings, such as emotions, or we only find ourselves by experiencing body sensations. And we don't recognize that there is some conscious awareness that's present in all of those experiences. And that conscious awareness is the who that has the thoughts. And its location may be found embedded in or in the feelings and thoughts and sensations. But it would be, if that were the case, there would be some distinction that could still be made. It's not embedded in a way that it's trapped in thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And then on the other hand, it can be more keenly experienced as being located differently. And that location can vary depending on the degree to which the clarity is there, the clarity between the distinction of what is the observer, what is that aware presence, and what is being experienced. So I tried to stick to the time frame. Did I do okay?
You did excellently. Thank you. I think there's a lot. I feel like we could really do a whole session on just a practice, to be honest. I think that could be so beautiful because it sort of quietens down the mind enough. And for me, it's like becoming aware of the distinction between the witness and the personality, maybe, like, you know what I mean? So the quiet aspect of who we are and the one, you know, that's just having thoughts or sensations or whatever. So it's kind of teasing parts of the psyche, maybe, apart a little bit, like creating a distinction, maybe. I don't know what it was like for you, Ramsey. Like what Ramsey has a different practices to me, so it could be different for you.
Well, I've been doing Eckhart Tolle's similar type of exercises whereby you realize who or where the thoughts come from and who's behind them. And I found yours are sorry, but they were much simpler, and I was able to easily distinguish where it's coming from and where it's heading. It's like watching a movie. It's like, oh, here it's gone, and I don't engage with it while we were like when you asked the question, did you realize it? The second time we close our eyes, I go, okay, here it is. I'm not touching it. It's just passing by. So it's a very powerful exercise. Thank you for sharing it.
For sure. Yeah. And so that distinction for most people will be based upon a capacity of the mind. So the mind has the capacity, and this is used a lot in psychotherapy, to step away from your experience in a way that you can be more objective about it. And so in this exercise, we're just opening that up more, so that there is that witnessing quality that's inherent in the mind itself. But then self-realization takes that a step further, so that this gives a taste of what's possible. I think that's a technique.
That's a really good taster. Sorry, Ramsey, I just saw you starting a question.
Yeah, I have just one question. Did that come after you had your Kundalini experience, basically your point of awakening? Or was it a practice that you had to do in order to get there?
Okay. So, I mean, you're referring to self-realization? The moment of
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
No, that didn't. When I said I didn't get enlightened, that's what I meant. The Kundalini didn't do that. So to give you some perspective, I had been meditating for about 22 years, and I just kept on doing that. Right. I used to go to a group practice, which was not TM people. Actually, I was the only TM person there, but we would meditate together. And on this occasion, I'd been traveling all week. It was a Friday night. I was kind of had a cold. I didn't want to go. I called and I said, I'm not coming. They said, oh, please do come. I said, all right, well, I'll come if you'll let me lie down if I need to, because they kind of had this rule, like you can't lie down and sleep during the meditation. And they said, okay. So I went, and to my surprise, I didn't fall asleep. But what happened in that meditation was when I woke up. Complete surprise, came out of nowhere. It wasn't something that was caused by anything I did. That was, and the way I understood the process up until that point was, you just keep meditating because that's going to cause it eventually. All the stress will go away, and then awakening will happen. I can tell you that all my stress had not gone away in that moment, but I woke up and I realized that the causal relationship could not be traced. I could not track a causal relationship other than practicing spiritual practice for many years as a way of preparing, perhaps, for that change to take place. And so the way I refer to it now is it's grace that gives the moment of awakening. It's not something we do, which means we can't make ourselves wake up, no matter how hard we try.
Yeah.
We just can prepare.
That's
Yes.
it.
And the point of awakening, that point when you wake up, does the world collapse?
No.
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 Go ahead.
At least not in my experience. No, the world didn't collapse. After I woke up, and the meditation time was over, I opened my eyes and it was all the same as before. I mean, same people, they looked the same, they talked the same. I realized the thing that happened was more not a collapse of the world, but a withdrawal, a lack of being shackled to the body-mind. But the body-mind was still there. I still had a cold. I was still tired.
You still had to get home, you still had to. Yeah, I can really relate to that. Like, I love that grace gives the moment of awakening. You're not kind of able to. It's not something you can make happen. It's just something that's kind of, I suppose, you're blessed with. I think for me it was a real blessing. But my website is called wakeuplittlesusie.com because truly, when I least expected it, I had that similar sort of awakening. And it's like I never went back from that. I think it's a point of that shift in your perception. And there is things stay the same. You still have to, pay for your car park, or you still have to, do what life goes on. But you go on in that life in a whole different.
Right. It's a point of no return.
Perception. It really is. It really is. It was for me as well. I love that. Grace gives the moment of awakening. Nice. I'm trying to figure out our segue because this conversation is so yummy. But I'm very aware that people come to you, Joel, when they're searching, when they're on a journey, when they're on a spiritual path themselves, and they're, maybe they're going through challenges, or they need support, or they've had experiences that they can't, understand, or they need kind of clarification with. And I know that you do a lot of work with people through supportive processes and practices, attunements, different meditations that you offer others. And from what I understand, this information came to you through your own practices. Like you kind of found your way into how to support others. I know that it's a big part of the self-inquiry that I was doing. Like, how can I help? How can I serve myself and others? And then once you kind of offer yourself to serve, you're gifted with the toolkit, or the tools, so to speak. So do you want to just go a little bit into how you do that, like, and how that shows up, and how people can get in contact with you on Full Dawn Circle, how that works with your offerings?
Well, I provide meditative practices to people, or help them tweak what they're doing. And those some of that's founded on the practice of TM, but also things that occurred spontaneously in my experience, which I tested by doing them as practices to see what they did. And I came to understand that there are many practices that have different effects. And for some people, their practice doesn't need to be as focused on transcending as more on clarification or improvement in perceptual process. So meditation for that. The attunement process initially began as I was meditating, and I was visited by a benevolent being, which was a surprise. And that being instructed me in doing attunements. And then he said, now go out into the world and do this. And my response was, are you crazy? You think that I can just jump out there and start doing this? But it turned out that there was a group that I was participating in that was mostly people who were involved in crystals and tarot cards and stuff. But it was in the spiritual wasteland of where I was living at the time. That was the best I could do in finding camaraderie. So I contacted the host of it and I said, look, this happened. Can I practice this with the group? Can I experiment? And she said, oh, sure. That sounds like fun. And so that went so well that I decided, okay, this is worth spending more time practicing and seeing what results I get. And the kinds of results, they're very individual. But the purpose of doing it is for me to effectively take a look. It's like I have a way of looking into them. It's hard to describe what that is. But I can see where there are contractions, things that are holding them back. And I don't really do much other than look at them. And then that triggers a process where what I call divine intelligence just is alerted. Hey, here's something, do what you can with this, smooth it out, fix it, give them a relief or whatever. So people, depending on what they come with, will have very different kinds of experiences. So that was how what I'm referring to as in-session attunements got started. I started doing remote attunements, which meant not having to be linked up online or on the phone, when I realized that could work as well. So that's another way I do it. And then one time I was working with someone doing an attunement, and I started getting numbers were circulating in my mind. What are those? So it took me some time to figure it out. And I realized these are frequencies. I'm being given numerical frequencies. And so I started to explore what I could do with that. And that was where the audio attunements came in. So what I would do is I would collect the frequencies for individuals or for a group, because the group audio attunements are not specific to each person. And then I would embed them in an audio stream, which has become more sophisticated over time just because I've become more aware of tools that I can use to create sound. And so that's where the audio attunements come in. And the purpose of those especially for the group audio attunements, is to use the process of natural surrender, let the frequencies have their impact without judgment or even any kind of attention to it. And it has an effect of what I would say is aligning with divine presence or aligning with the divine. That's its underlying purpose. So, and other than that, I do help with people who are having experiences they don't understand, or they don't know what context to put them in. Some people who are having troublesome experiences, and some people who are having really great experiences, but they don't have a framework to understand it. So that's where the model of the stages of awakening comes in as a way to kind of contextualize experiences that people have.
And if anybody is interested in following up with Joel on some of what he offers there, his offerings are on his website, fulldawn.circle.org. So do check him out. I think it's on the ticker tape below. Nicely done, Ramsey. Nicely done. It sounds very like Ramsey and I trained a little bit as well in mediumship, and psychic ability. So it feels, when you describe that, Joel, very similar to what we experience when we do mediumship. Like literally information is just available in that moment when you're in a space with another person, and we're not doing anything. There's no doer. It's just 1 minute it's there and then it's not, and you just have to really trust what comes in. And you, as I always say to our students, you just drop off the package, you just drop it off, and you're not trying to have a particular outcome, you're not invested in the, we're not the ones who are, taking responsibility, I suppose, for the other person ultimately. But gosh, this conversation could really go on. But if we have a minute or two, maybe we can talk briefly about these current changes in consciousness that seems to be talked about a lot, like ascension and, shifting into different 3D, 4D, 5D, and so on and above that. What are your thoughts on that, Joel? What do you... without going off on one?
Well, there are infinite possibilities of what one might experience. And then there are, of course, infinite possibilities beyond that we can't experience. We're not omniscient. But when I hear about some of these more unusual experiences, I'm curious. I would probably want to interview those people, not like this, but I mean, talk to them and ask them questions to further clarify what that experience really is. But I don't doubt that there are experiences. I do doubt that some people are having the experiences they think they're having because they just have an inaccurate understanding of what it is. So self-realization, so many misconceptions about it. Awakening, misconceptions, oneness, misconceptions. And there are a lot of people out there who are having some kind of a shift, but they're just putting it in the wrong category. And unfortunately, some of them decide they're going to go out and teach when they're not mature enough in whatever the shift was or the awakening was that they had to really be out there. Because I think it just causes more confusion for people. So
that was very succinct. So what about healthy skepticism with 1 minute?
I'm all for that too. I know you're a proponent of healthy skepticism. So am I. But I try to do it with gentle kindness.
Yeah, compassion.
Yeah.
Ramsey.
Yes, we're coming to an end of our 1 hour. I was just putting out there that you're going to be joining us again for round 2 of this discussion. It was enlightening, eyes opening, and I really appreciated all the little nuggets that you've given us today on the show. And we thank you so much from in12d, the three of us, because Kathy is not with us today. And hopefully we'll see each other soon on round 2 of Joel Richards. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Joel. And we'll see you next Thursday.
Okay. You will?
Thank you. Thanks again, Joel.
Thank you.